entertain a motion if there's no changes or additions.
I'll make a motion.
So first from Jeff, second from Sarah. Any further comments, discussion on it? All right, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, same sign. All right, passes. Changes or additions to agenda? Harry, do you have anything? Okay. Number 4 is public comment. This is open to the public here or on Zoom. Anything related to the items that we currently have on our agenda, you can come forth and address the planning commission if you like. I just ask you to keep your comments to 2 or 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Brenda Pearson, 136 Bridge Avenue, Wabasha. And I just want to make a few comments. I did read over your short-term rental regulations, not sure where you adopted them from, but they're real good. It's a good start. One of the things that I want to mention that I did not see addressed other than a blanket, make sure you follow all state, local laws and regulations, is I really think it's adamant because some people don't know what they don't know. And I think it's our job, your job, to educate our community as to the fact that they have to hold a Minnesota Health Department license for overnight lodging and maybe just notate, I think it's 146 something or another from his Department of Health, as well as having business insurance. And it really boils down to the fact that, God forbid, a catastrophic accident happens and they don't have their health license. And so now it puts our community at jeopardy of the Minnesota coming down and saying, hey, you know what the license are. I mean, you should know this as planning and zoning persons. But more importantly, if they don't have business insurance, their homeowner's insurance can deny any claims. So God forbid there's a loss of life. That really is going to put a bad spotlight, especially if it's super catastrophic, on our community. Not just on the person, but on our community first and foremost. And then if they use the terms intermittently, like many do, bed and breakfast, Airbnb, they think we're one and the same. Then now I have to defend myself because I'm technically the only bed and breakfast in town. The Anderson House, that's a whole other thing. I think their sign should be changed from B&B to what they are, or just historic Anderson House on it. Because even by your standards, they have more than 5 rooms. They're not listed as a bed and breakfast. They're more considered an inn. Or if there's 5 rooms or say 5 cabins or more, then it's considered a lodge. So there's 2 different health department licenses. And that's really one thing. It's great to say you're going to sign an affidavit that you're responsible for following all local, state. But I can tell you, when I first took over, it wasn't until I was in Rotary and we were talking about, it came up with the CPA there, Tim, he said something about lodging tax. I'm like, what? I know I'm collecting a lot of tax, but no one told me where to put it. No one told me where to submit it. And so that was one of my things, is I was caught off guard. I knew I was collecting tax, but I was so overwhelmed with starting a new business. So I came to the city and I said, hey, I've been collecting this tax. I don't even know where to turn it in. Oh, that's, the 20th of every month, you should have been turning it in. Well, I didn't know that. So I can't do what I don't know. And I think with a lot of people buying up houses that don't live here, they're either skirting under the issue or simply let's just educate them. Let's pretend they don't know and put it on the line of, now you can't say you don't know. You need a health license, business insurance. I like that you put in having fire inspection. It's very important. There's so many people allowed per square foot. That might be something you want to look into. It is stated right on the Minnesota licensure. And then more importantly, you added in there about if they have a pool or a hot tub, how they need to just post a sign that it's not like told them to break the law. Because by law, if you have a pool or a hot tub and you're renting to the public, you have to have a health department license. So I'd hate for you all to get thrown in a mix of telling people to break a law and then saying, well, we didn't know. So those are the things that I'd like for sure to be addressed before you adamantly vote all of this in, is really truly, let's protect our community, protect our city from lawsuits, because if you say break the law by posting a sign, someone's gonna come and get you. And that's all I have to say. And then just making sure that property taxes are legit. So if somebody's living there, it's a residential household with your, what's the word, help me out. You get a certain amount back if it's your residence.
Homestead.
Thank you, homestead. That, if they're going to rent it out half the year and live in it half the year, then making sure that they're in an R2 district, like I am, but because I added the brewery, it added a whole other mix. So just those particular things, those are gonna bring everybody up to a standard. And those that don't wanna play the rules, maybe they'll sell their house and maybe families can move into our community and put money into our community, whereas if they live out of town, which many do, they don't spend any of their money in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience who would like to make a comment? Anybody on Zoom that would like to make a comment at all? I think it's only Chuck, right? So.
I think it might have been dropped.
Oh, sorry, he's there. It's just
Okay.
that,
Okay.
I'll have to I'll reconnect on the
That's okay.
thing, but yeah, Chuck, I think he's here for the second item.
Okay, that's fine.
So we could just let him comment at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Brian Mom is coming for that second item.
Okay. All right, not seeing or hearing anybody come up to the podium, we'll close that part. There's no public hearing, so we'll go to number 6A, short-term rental review. Harry, I'll just kind of turn it over to you for a little update on that, where you stand, and then we can have discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to go through all 66 pages.
Thank you, appreciate that.
But what I will do is give an overview as to where, as staff, we landed on this particular issue. So a few things just to note, we have updated a bunch of different sections, one of them being the definition for dwelling unit. So that's the first one that we made clear. Dwelling units are rented on a monthly or yearly, just, a longer basis than typically what you would rent an Airbnb for. And that the city attorney wanted to make sure that any of the allowances for dwelling units did not extend to short-term rentals, that they were very separate in how they're viewed in the code. It's more of a technicality really, but I feel like where he's going with it is to make sure that if there are any exceptions or allowances that dwelling units get to enjoy, that doesn't extend to short-term. So I think that's kind of what he's getting at. The use chart, and I do apologize, the use chart that is in there actually doesn't have it, but it would be under the residential section. So it would be in between. So it would be between accessory apartment and bed and breakfast, short-term rental dwelling unit, and that would be permitted in RC, RLA, RGT, R1, R2, and TBC. So that's everything except for general commercial, highway commercial, and industrial, which we talked about at the last meeting. The next thing was providing an actual definition for short-term rentals. So what we can actually refer to within our code, and to help sort of designate what is and what is not a short-term rental. Hotel, motel, or it's not considered a part of a hotel, motel, or bed or breakfast, and it's rented for a period of less than 30 consecutive days for tourist or transient use. So that is borrowing mostly from Lake City's code. The final thing, which I included as a bonus item, is the potential, I guess, first draft of if we were to regulate short-term rentals, what that might look like. A lot of it is going to be based off of Lake City's code. I did add some smaller suggestions in there in order to make sure that it fit specifically for Wabasha's code. And then the city attorney did take a look at it and wanted to make sure that there were some additional things in here, particularly if we're talking about a, some sort of affidavit that says that the owner is complying with all the regulations, that is also included within the code, just to provide some teeth to that affidavit. And there are a few other things in here. I'm not going to go through all of them. The stuff that Wendy was able to provide includes this registration application form, which is borrowed again very heavily from Lake City. And then the affidavit on the back there is also what we borrowed from Lake City. So in terms of this affidavit, I look at this and I say, you know what, this could probably expand and include more things. It could include insurance, if we wanted to require insurance, or have someone self-certify that they are providing insurance that is consistent with the short-term rental. And there are probably a few other things I just can't think of off the top of my head, but that is generally what the entire thing is in terms of the short-term rental ordinance in front of you. So I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thanks, Harry, for that. I'll just open it up to the committee or the commission. Any questions for Harry at all?
So this would apply also to a residence that's used from time to time as a like a short-term rental.
Yeah,
Does that have to be specified or?
It's a 30-day difference.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't matter what. If somebody like rents their house as an Airbnb on weekends, we don't have to specify that it's normally residential. It's just the amount of time classifies it.
Yes.
Did we ever find out anything about whether the state, there's a lot of rules like Brenda's brought up, the regulations and stuff, and they're state mandated. Did we ever find out if the state enforces them? Because
I think we tried to call the state about this. We got sent on a number of paths. I think we left a message, and I can't remember if someone got back to Wendy on that, but I'm assuming it's like the city where it's a complaint driven process, not proactive. But even if you were to complain about it, I'm not sure what their process is for the licensing thing. To respond to Brenda's comment, I was going through some material online and I did see an example from another community that is part of a packet that was sent out. It was like, notice, you're under state law required to get a license. And it was kind of like just included in that welcome packet of, so I think there's examples out there if you wanted to specifically call out the license thing.
they have a lot of places too also have FAQ page
Yeah.
for people to do that would answer those questions. Like, so you could have that in there, say, okay, well, refer to the state statute, whatever. This is
Yeah.
what you have to go by.
But yeah, I still think, like, again, I wasn't at the last meeting, but just staff have concerns that this is a currently non-budgeted regulation. I don't think even $80 or $100 is going to cover the cost to administer all these regulations. So I've stated that before, I'll state it again. It's an unbudgeted expense. So, this refers to a zoning administrator. We don't have a zoning administrator on staff. That's Wendy Bush. Is Wendy Bush now in charge of counting out parking spots for people. When I called Lake City and I asked them about the process, they described counting out parking spots. I don't want staff to be counting out parking spots for people. So I know that the committee went in a different direction and we will follow the lead of council in this commission, but I just would personally think we need to kind of go through this and just say, what is it that we want to regulate and spend staff time on? But you and I have talked about this, so I just don't think the commission is hard. Like, let's be cognizant of this is like an unbudgeted expense that we're going to regulate. And I don't think $80 is going to cover the time and effort on this.
But seriously, what time and effort do you have to put in? We're relying on the VRBO person to self-certify,
Mhm.
so you're not gonna go
Well, I
out
guess
and count
you've started-
parking spaces. I mean, we gotta have a little trust here on both sides.
Yeah.
It's not
Well,
like,
I would rather leave the parking references out. I mean, I'd want to go through this and just say, other than the affidavit, what is the expectations of staff doing? And then let's say, Brenda, you say, hey, Caroline, I think there's an unlicensed hot tub in Wabasha. Now, is it staff time calling the state of Minnesota and going through the phone tree to tell the state of Minnesota we've got an unlicensed hot tub? Or, because then am I revoking their license because of what's in our ordinance? Because they didn't get a hot tub from another agency. And so then when you're asking me, what's the state of Minnesota doing? If we're become aware of someone's not licensed, then are we spending staff time to enforce state of Minnesota requirements? Or do we just have to report it to the state of Minnesota?
Well, I can't help but think about this with respect to other business types that are regulated at state levels, including my business, and that's what I know the most, but I hire staff members that are licensed at the board of dentistry level, state of Minnesota level. We have to maintain our X-ray equipment through the state. We do everything through the state. The city has nothing to do with a business like mine. So my question is, do we need to have another layer of, to your point, Caroline? I mean, my concern is that and this is the way it was when I was in architecture. If you had to, when you were doing a set of construction documents, you would put a specific note in one spot that would be at the highest level. You wouldn't repeat that same note place after place after place, because if you missed one reference and something changed, all of your documents would be out of order. So my question is, if we have some regulation at the city level, are we trying to do again what the state's already doing or should be doing? I guess my concern as a city taxpayer too, and knowing that the city staff is stretched, is it within the city's purview or not? I don't know. That's my question. Here at the council, I guess I don't know how council feels about this, but I'm fine, I guess, my feeling was I'm fine having a definition about this and kind of putting bounds around what we as a city think this thing is. But beyond that, I don't know if regulating it at the city level makes sense when there's already regulatory processes at the state level that these people should be following.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can definitely put in FAQs like per state, here's an FAQ, because we're corresponding with them on their lodging tax. But if someone's not getting their health license, who takes the complaint, So.
Well, it doesn't seem like it would be time consuming or expensive just to have a series of I forget the word, but basic generic letters. It's come to our attention, you don't have this is in violation of state law. Maybe we need to find out exactly how the state regulates it. But I don't think it hurts to have, like you say, FAQs. You're operating on Airbnb or whatever. Keep in mind, these are the state regulations you have to follow. formula than answer this.
Yeah, I don't know. My opinion is that, I mean, I like to have this because it's fine with the lodging tax, but I most certainly agree with Caroline about we need to figure out what is really staff doing. We don't do anything with restaurants. We assume they have a health inspection and we don't govern that. I would assume the state does that, right? Why would this be any different than that?
Yeah.
So if we put in there, you must follow all state and national rules, what's the difference? You're not enforcing anything. You may have to submit the complaint because somebody submitted to you as a city, right? And then the state would take it. That's my only question, but I don't know at what point does the state regulate this versus.
That would be a question that I have for maybe an attorney or someone wiser than me, or maybe Harry, you know this question. If we are saying in our local ordinance, you have to comply with state statute and federal laws, does that therefore, because it's in our ordinance, now mean that we're responsible, that if we get a complaint that they're not following a state statute, we are responsible for, you know, revoking their license, finding out is it true, and then does that mean they get their Airbnb license revoked because we find out they're in violation of the state statute? Because even just to like revoke somebody's license over that, I imagine takes time and research and coordination to figure out, yeah, I guess you did violate a state statute. So, you know, I guess I'm revoking your license. Stop your business, you know, so it kind of, when I'm saying it out loud, and I think what I did talk with my clarity, it would mean whatever we have in there. If we find out that they're not compliant, then we revoke their license. And then I guess if they want to fight us on us revoking their license, that's where I get a little uncomfortable with. I'm enforcing someone else's laws to say whether or not you get a license with us. So I don't know.
That's why it'd be good to find out how the state handles this, you know, as far as like a restaurant's in violation.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone's selling liquor underage, I mean, how's that enforced? I don't think, are police doing that?
Yeah, so some of that is false to our police, but if somebody's doing something outside their liquor license at the state level, the state's doing it, not the
Right.
city. I mean, we've had that scenario a couple years ago, so I just, that's my only concern. I like the idea of registering these, I like the idea of the affidavit, I like the idea of the definitions, I mean, everything come up with, I think is worthwhile. I just think it's, the one thing is about enforcement, and if that's the case, then we need to discuss, we need to find out what that is. If you just put in there, they will follow all state and national federal laws, is that good enough? I mean, I don't police some of the liquor stuff and restaurant stuff in town.
But if Scott doesn't follow his dental laws, we're not revoking.
The city is not revoking, the state would have revoked his
The
license.
state doesn't give them.
But in
Yeah.
this case, if we're proposing a rental registry, I understand that we are now licensing all these short-term rentals. So then, and then I feel like with a liquor license, I believe that is run through the state too. I'm not aware that the city licenses anything else other than somebody's pet license.
I don't consider this a license, a short-term.
We issue liquor licenses every year. The city does.
But then
But we don't-
the state
And
process.
we get paid for
Yeah, and there are certain things we enforce, and there are certain things we don't. So we enforce the underage serving
Mhm.
as well as whatever. So we enforce that, but the state enforces how they get their liquor, where they get their liquor, how they got it legally and all that. I don't see this as licensing a short-term rental. This is a registering, we're not licensing anything. That's, to me, is not the way I perceive that.
Like what, do we have any, control, or is there anything we enforce?
I don't license
There,
Brenda's bed and
That's
breakfast.
what I was just gonna ask.
But
We permit it in the use of the zoning and stuff,
Yeah.
but I have no say over her license.
Yeah.
it says in this, in what we have in front of us, it says process for revocation. It says that if they're not in compliance with applicable city, state, and federal laws, ordinance, and regulations, or we receive complaints, then we start a process of revoking a short-term rental permit. So there is it does say then if they aren't following what we have here, we would revoke. It's referring to not to a license, but their short-term rental.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
so where the revocation and sort of really the detail that process comes from, Mike Flaherty had requested that
yeah, that's
that
what I
there
thought.
be a very clear process as to why someone might get their permit revoked and what the process would be like, not just for them, but for us in terms of working through that. So a lot of that information that's in there is because, you know, the city attorney felt like we needed that. I think where it comes to, it's hard for me to say with the state versus us enforcing state rules. I'm not Mike Flaherty, but I think at least it seems like that would be something that the state would have to handle. If, like, in my experience at least, like the state is the one that's going to figure out, do you comply or not? I don't think that that's up to us. Now, if we do hear that they're not compliant with the state, I think at that point, we would have the ability to revoke it.
So I'm just on Minnesota licensing website. There's a lodging license page that explains that home rental requires a hotel or motel license at the state level. It has one or more units for one night or more. The state already has a provision for this type of, and that's exactly what we're talking about. And then furthermore, the state of Minnesota sales and use tax has a website that's related to short-term rentals and the lodging and related services, the taxes that are due, or the sales tax that are due. So Minnesota seems to already have structures in place, and people that are renting out their homes as a vacational rental should, it looks like, have a hotel or motel license. Is what it looks like to me on this website.
Mm-hmm. And I think you said that. Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
if the city doesn't register or keep tabs on how many auto parts shops we have in town, or how many restaurants we have in town, or have quotas about these things. I mean, as from a in my mind, from the comprehensive plans standpoint, we need to think as a planning commission, where do we want these? You know, how do we, if we want to control them, how do we do that? How do we control the number or the location of them? But if there's already structures at the state level for licensing, just like there are for, you know, restaurants and other stuff, do we need to get into it?
I'm with you. I would. I think the only reason we're doing this is so we have a fair level playing field for lodging tax. And are we collecting the appropriate that way? So to me, it's like permitting somebody to dock at a boat or at a dock or something. A boat. To me, it's the enforcement's all on the state. I mean,
So I think the first discussions that we took part in were mostly related to, is the city, and the concern was raised, is the city collecting lodging tax that's due to them, right? And then quickly, I think it became, hopefully there's an honor system there that people are paying their tax, but for us to go down this path, it's gonna require a lot of staff time to collect a relatively small lodging tax. I don't know what the lodging tax.
I don't know. Nobody can tell. Nobody knows.
knows.
Yeah, I've got records on it. I mean, we realized that law was on the books and that we needed 100% compliance to the best of our ability. So we're at 90 to 95% compliance. And I will say there were a lot of people unaware of the lodging tax. So that is being taken care of.
Yep.
And like I said, what came back to the city on one particular unit who wasn't paying was $1.79. So I mean, 34 cents just to send them the letter and but regardless,
Yeah, but
but we're good on the lodging tax, yeah.
How can you
But
find out?
the lodging tax, just because the city only gets, what, 3%,
Mhm.
okay? That doesn't, there's that other $55,000 last year that was collected, all went to the visitor
Yes.
bureau.
Mhm.
So even though you're saying it doesn't benefit the city, it does benefit the city.
Yes,
All that money that would have to probably come out of our general budget to go, that would give to the Chamber of Commerce, it's being paid by the people that are running VRBOs and bed and breakfast and hotels.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, I don't know, I don't think it's right to say that it's not worth our time collecting lodging
no,
tax.
I would say, you know, even the 34, I was surprised, but I think some people, they don't rent during the winter. So we'll hopefully see more coming through.
So how do we know where these?
We did research, I mean, it's all up on Airbnb, so
Yeah.
it wasn't,
But Airbnb and VRBO aren't the only people don't always all rent through those places.
mhm,
So if you have some sort of registration, and even though it's more or less voluntary, at least you'll probably get most people want to do business right, I think. So they're gonna register with the city, so at least the city knows where they are. You know, I think that's important, just from contact information, if something happens at one of these places. You know who the owner is, the fire department knows who to contact, and,
so. Yeah, I would just say on the lodging tax, we feel confident we've addressed that problem, but.
To me, yes, if you start to register them and there's a process now for short-term regulations, which we don't have today. It's a definition of what it is, where it's used, permitted. I mean, to me, this stuff covers it. There's a few things that would change in the regulation portion of it, but I think overall it addresses what we want to cover, or at least from my understanding, what the city council wanted us to cover.
And just to clarify, we want to be in the business of then revoking permits or revoking registrations and saying you can't be in business here because you didn't follow
The rules?
what we have.
The state of Minnesota already has rules set up that says to get a lodging license. And if people aren't doing this, then they're not doing it right. I mean, they should have a lodging license if they're gonna do this. To have a license, you need to apply for a license, contact the Minnesota Department of Health. Your establishment should be inspected. That their equipment is installed and operational, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. I mean, this is what we're hoping to do here, or what this is turning into is some sort of a big application, but the states are doing it.
Yeah, do we revoke the American Inn? No, we would never. You would hope that they follow the right hotel rules, right? I mean, that's what I don't understand why the city would get in the process of revoking.
Well, what does the city do?
This is just a
People don't pay their-
registration, this isn't a license.
That's why there's some short-term regulations on here that I would get rid of, I would do. But I know per our discussion with the city attorney, I mean, he kind of wanted some of this in there to give us an out if they're not following the rule to revoke it. Makes sense. I don't think we're gonna go around looking to revoke people at all costs, but if all of a sudden there's a complaint and it doesn't get addressed at the state level, why shouldn't we have the ability to revoke it? If Brenda's not following the rules for health, why can't I revoke her license as a city standpoint? I mean, we're assuming she's following all the rules. I'm assuming Caroline's following all the rules at the American Inn. I guess I don't know what the difference would be. Now we're just trying to capture that and figure out who the owners are, where they're at, and what's the tax we're getting for that. I can't imagine this is gonna turn into, we're gonna have to police everyone everywhere and make sure they're following the state regulation. That's not the way I take it.
Yeah.
But if we need legal to clarify that, I'm all for it before we move forward, about the revoking.
What do we do right now if a hotel doesn't pay their lodging tax?
We have one big one in town. Everyone knows who they are. So, yeah, I mean, because we're getting into what happens if someone's paying their lodging tax. We don't have a process to say the American Inn is out of business. We just have a process to say you're gonna start getting charged double or
Yeah,
triple
okay.
what you owe. So that's the process for not paying the lodging tax. I am not aware, although someone, it could be researched, that we are saying that we are regulating if American Inn is following state law at this point, so.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess I would then just go on to recommend maybe we remove that from our requirements. Because then it's like, obviously they should be following state and federal law. It might not be, why are we repeating that? But I do like the idea of the FAQ sheet that says, by the way, this is a state law that's included, but I don't want to make us responsible for it. Knowing, because we just got a call a couple days ago asking us how many egress windows they need in the basement of their Vrbo. And we don't have anyone on staff that can tell you how many egress windows there you need, but that definitely is a state law. And so now they're looking for the city to provide answers on how many egress windows they need.
But is
So-
that different from a regular residential dwelling? I mean, I would imagine that's the same, whatever the house is. I
Yeah,
wouldn't imagine it's any different than a regular house.
At a certain point, you reach a certain occupancy depending on the number of units you have, then you're gonna, a certain number of occupants is gonna trigger a certain number of egress routes that are required.
Mhm.
So that's by the state building code. So depending on what they're planning on, or if they got 2 individual units downstairs or 3 individual units in a certain space, that it may trigger need for egress, but.
Do you want to take, so, yeah.
They need that, I mean, they should call CMS. you know?
Okay, yeah, that's what I said, but,
And then, I mean, when we, you know, when I worked in architecture and we were doing residential construction or commercial construction, you know, it was your job as the architect or the designer to get the code right and to do your own code analysis and then present your plans to the city code officials. And they weren't there to hold your hand, you know, they were gonna say, you know, you might once in a while get something that's nice that would help lead you in the right direction or help you, but, you know, that's not the city's job to answer those questions with years with it.
They have Google, they can try that.
Yeah.
everything else, there's other things, like I said, I don't want to get into parking, I don't want people counting parking spots.
Where did that come into it?
Lake City said, as part of their process, they count parking spots.
To be sure that they have enough
Mhm,
based on the number. of
mhm. But they have a full-time planner on staff, so,
When we did that downtown. But that's different. probably.
mhm.
I have one question about the locations. You said except commercial or industrial,
except for general commercial, highway commercial, and industrial.
general commercial. Okay, so downtown on Pembroke Avenue, I understand someone's putting in a street level short-term rental. Is that in,
Traditional downtown.
Traditional downtown.
Yeah. It's either TDC or R2, so it would be allowed.
okay. So that would need some kind of ordinance to say, you know, street level should be retail or services or.
Well, that's a whole different discussion.
Right.
I mean, that's not even, remotely related to this.
Yeah.
That's an issue that
I know, it's. we don't want to touch it.
I don't, because there's, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Caroline's right. There's a number of things in here that the regulation side of things that I would get rid of. But that's me. Because I think a lot of it is just should be handled at the state level, and my opinion is I don't care. But so, I mean, I'm fine with some of the stuff, but if we want to go through it with a fine tooth comb and say, yeah, I think this is the way it should be. I don't know what other people's thoughts are on it.
No, I mean, I admire Brenda's, you know, commitment to having the strong sense that our lodging establishments should be meeting requirements and be safe and so that's great. But if we start doing this for this type of a business, what if somebody raises a concern about another type of business and wants the city to chime in on that and start regulating something? Daycare providers, or, you know, I mean, the city doesn't expect their daycare providers only.
County does.
Right, so somebody else is doing it. There's already something up, but if somebody said, well, I'm concerned about this and that, and it's sometimes the city, I think, can just say, well, that's not in our jurisdiction. I mean, it's in our jurisdiction, but that's, we don't manage that part of it. So my sense is a very thorough FAQ, informing people about their responsibilities as somebody that owns a lodging business. Putting them into the website for getting their notice of Department of Health, all that stuff. But you know, if we want to have a registry so that we're getting lodging taxes, fine, but I guess I don't feel like I'm not a council.
Yeah, it almost seems like the city should just be responsible for getting lodging taxes and deciding where they should or should not be.
I agree.
But you gotta know where they are, so you need a registration or something to
Yeah,
register where they
yeah.
are. That's the-
Yeah, I mean, I like the short-term rental registration, partly because it also gives us property owner, gives us a couple of information that we currently don't have, probably. I mean, there's some places in town, I have no clue who owns it. I mean, I know who rents it, but I think I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the affidavit because I think it just puts it back on the person that's doing it. I could argue, I like the definition, the use, and the short-term definition. I could be up in the air about regulations. I would personally trim it down, but because I don't think we're in the business of regulating it, but I do read the FAQ of these are the steps you need to take when you do it or want to do it, and you need to follow all these rules and you need to do X, Y, and Z, and every year you need to send a check to whoever and blah, blah, blah. That would be much more than we have today. And I think it would be a benefit and go from there. And I don't think that's a lot of staff time. I mean, it doesn't need to be done tomorrow, but I mean, it doesn't need, it shouldn't be done, we shouldn't wait until 2024 either, but I mean, I think it just needs to be done. That's my opinion, so I don't know. Any other questions, comments for staff or anybody?
So in terms of direction, I'm hearing either a robust FAQ sent out as part of lodging tax requirements or FAQ lodging tax and a rental registration process with an affidavit signed. So just trying to understand what.
So I'll make a motion. I say that we accept the definition of dwelling units. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, when you look at the Lodging Minnesota website, Minnesota Department of Health, the term short-term rental in this period of 30 days or more is not.
Yeah, it is.
Not congruent with what they have on their website, so. They're hotel or motel, it says if you rent rooms for periods of less than 1 week, your establishment will be licensed as a hotel or motel.
Oh,
In addition to traditional hotels and motels, some common examples include bed and breakfast, vacation home rental, bunkhouses, or camper cabins. That's less than 1 week. If you have sleeping accommodations for 1 week or more and have 5 or more beds, then you are considered a lodging establishment. So if we have the short-term rental that has this 30-day period, 30 days or less or whatever, because that's what's related to if somebody's actually has a lease in a place or what, where do we come up with 30 days?
Yeah, I mean, like you can rent a dwelling unit monthly, right? You probably can't rent a dwelling unit for 2 days, as far as I understand. That's part of like a lease for an apartment. So short-term rental.
I think most communities do define short-term rentals as 30 days or less too. That's regardless of what it says on the state plan.
Sorry, Eric.
Oh, no, that's fine. So I will move to accept the definition of dwelling unit change, the changes to the use chart as described, definition change, the use definition of short-term rental, which is in our packet. Yeah. Yeah,
that would help you.
what's that?
I don't think, you briefly mentioned maybe a permit fee. Make it enough that it's going to hit the pocketbook, but not put a person out of business. So a number that just rolls off the top of my head is like, $250, $295. It's 2 days out of the entire year that it costs them. It gives the city enough money to put into a fund so that if they have to take time out to send letters, provide stamps and stuff, it covers that. And most will go, okay, I get it, I want to be legit, and they'll pay it. And hopefully the others just won't. And then, when you're writing the statutes of what to do, revoking, not revoking, is more, have it on the books that if there's complaints that come in and you find that, you can refer to the state, whoever makes the complaint, you have ready for them the state's information. Here's who you need to contact at the state because that's the state law. So that it takes it off you, but it's still, I believe, like Harry said, and what the attorney said, is having it in there. It's also a protection, it's an education factor. And that way it protects both ways. It's not really leaving it up to you to revoke, but you can send a letter that says, we've had a complaint that you had 7 cars blocking neighbors, or you had noise ordinances in it. When it does come down to a complaint, if somebody makes a complaint to the police for noise, for cars, for whatever, the police should respond. It is their job. And if they find that there's a law broke, so they're gonna have to be in the know that, they know how to do it. And, it's the same thing with the liquor license. If somebody makes a complaint about something with a liquor license, the police do respond because they're there to help the state. So, then it's a win-win for everybody. The city gets money, puts it aside in the short-term rental or whatever, so it helps cover the cost of any staff having to do anything. And those that want to be legit will go, okay, I don't want to pay $295. Do I want to pay the fee? No, but I would do it to make it a level playing field. And then have the steps of, okay, they don't pay their lodging tax, you send a letter. They don't pay it for the second month, and you see them on Airbnb and you get the complaints. Then there's something written, whether it's, you put a lien on their property because they're using it as a business. It's just something that's a protection. So the steps to follow. My 2 cents.
Just real quick.
What?
So hang on.
Where is your fee? Where do fees stand?
It's,
$80 is on that application form. That came
No,
from
what
the
else
state.
do, what else do we charge a fee for?
everything. We have a fee schedule.
I know, I'm just.
Where is it? Good question.
All right, let me just finish that first and we'll
Okay.
open it back up for discussion. So my proposal is, right, the definition of dwelling change as discussed, use chart change as we discussed, the use definition of short-term as we discussed, the short-term form, the affidavit of compliance, and a development of a kind of a FAQ for that. That is what I'm proposing. I would like to bring back the short-term regulations form, just because I want to change a bunch of things on it. And I think we just need to discuss that a little bit more. So I would like to bring that back next month if we have a meeting. So that's the 5 things, 6 things I think I have.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, so the changes would be the definition of dwelling unit, the use chart changes to add a short-term rental dwelling, the use definition, adding that of a short-term rental, the short-term rental form, or whatever we call it, registration form, what is it called? Rental registration, the affidavit of compliance, and then the development of a FAQ for people that want it, which would include whatever we discuss.
So then, as part of that, we are developing like a rental license registration or permitting process, but we're gonna revise what that all.
Now, as far as the process, that whole regulation, the 162.109 short-term rental, I think we just need to work on that a little bit. What should we include and what shouldn't we include? Like, I don't think we include the pool thing. I don't think the parking thing needs to be in there. Do we really truly need the revocation part I think there needs to be discussion with the city attorney just to clarify, because he's the one that really recommended it. But can we simplify that to where it's not unless it's a major complaints nonstop, that we start getting involved? And can we make it a little bit more robust, that's not taxing on staff?
Mhm.
That's what I would want to do.
Okay.
So,
Here's the fee
There's
schedule
no
up here.
Chapter 11026.
I just Googled it, and
Okay.
so, and this is the old version, but I don't see anything, I don't see anything there.
There's nothing for bed and breakfast or hotel
No,
or any type of lodge.
no,
There's nothing on here for apartments or
no.
long-term rentals.
So,
I mean,
Mr.
yeah,
I just want to put, so you're talking about the 162.109, the short-term rental regulations, referring to the fee schedule about some sort of fee for the application for short.
I'm just wondering if we're all suddenly going to create a new fee for this, why is there a fee for other lodging types in our town? The American doesn't have a fee to register as a hotel.
Okay, all right.
It's a bed and breakfast, and a bed and breakfast doesn't pay a fee right now. So
Okay.
all of a sudden, we're creating a new class that requires this registration fee. And I'm just wondering, are we gonna pick and choose on that? I don't know how we've arrived at which ones do we have fees associated with right now, I guess. I'm just
For,
throwing it out there.
for bed and breakfast, I mean, whether it's conditional use or inheritance, those do require application permit fees. I mean, that's probably the only thing I
A permit.
Yeah. That would be where that would come out. But for like hotel.
I mean, I'm happy to, is the 80 enough?
I don't think so.
I mean, we can discuss that until we're blue in the face,
If
but
that property, if you're renting it that frequently, $250 is worth it to you.
I think we just threw that out there because that's what Lake City charges.
Yeah, no, I think higher is better, personally. I don't think it's gonna discourage anyone. I mean, most of these guys are charging $250 at night. So one night is squared away.
Scott, I see your point, but I don't know, I just want to know where these places are. That's why I think we need to have some kind of registration. You know,
I just don't want to have too much government overreach either.
Right,
I feel like
think singling out people, but we don't know where they are. I don't know where they are. You know where all these bed and breakfasts are, or not bed and breakfast, but
No, I don't.
I only do because I'm super familiar with the area and I look online frequently.
Yeah,
I'm just interested.
yeah. No, I'm not saying it's right or wrong to have a fee, it's just that I'm just thinking philosophically.
I'm just thinking-
We don't have fees for other types of lodging.
but we have permit fees,
you have permit.
which is, to me, it's similar.
Permit fees, how do those get paid or how,
No, so it's a one-time thing
when you,
when you apply for the permit. So if I wanted to open a bed and breakfast, I have to go through the whole conditional use permit, because I think they're all conditional use or interim use, one of the two,
I see.
right? If,
So there's
I mean,
a-
I'm almost positive that's the way it would, so I'd have to pay a fee for that. I don't have a clue what it is.
Yeah,
I mean, even this could be one-time fee actually too.
What is a one-time fee, isn't it?
I don't remember how we.
Some communities do it.
I would, to
Annually,
me,
others do it
once you register it, it's a one-time fee, that's me.
And I think I was looking at Cook County, because I was trying to find other smaller communities, and they did 200, but Lake City does 80. But, just was gonna mention, this is the FAQ that this Eli, Minnesota, because again, I'm trying to look for other smaller communities. The blue on black, a little hard to read, but it just says running your vacation home, be above board, license, go here, lodging tax, go here, insurance, contact your insurance company, and then I don't see it's like, and then they do have their license application, it does not have the affidavit, so this isn't necessarily phrased as, we're regulating all this, it's more about like, here's some helpful facts,
Well, you're
you know.
responsible to do it,
Yeah.
All right, I don't really care about this. Second thing, do you want to pull the fee to make sure we discuss it a little bit more, or do we want a different, I'm fine with the 80, to tell you the truth, but, because I think that's, we just pull it out of the air type of thing, but.
I'm fine with being higher, I mean, if we feel like it's.
Or if it's one time.
Personally, I'd make it annual, but that's just me. If they're profiting off our community, they're bringing people into our community, we need to profit off them as well. They're sucking up rental property in the city of Wabasha. It's real tough.
I agree, but I also agree with Scott. This is now, we don't do it for our gas stations.
Good.
Well, but I'm not gonna, so. Do we want to change the fee? Does anybody want to propose that? Otherwise, we have a second on the motion and we can vote on that and determine the fee later. If everyone's-
$80 just seems insignificant.
How about this? Since I want the registration stuff to come back, we'll just bring the fee back with staff input and go from there. So that's my motion. You fine with removing that? Okay. So any other discussion on this? There's a first.
Review the motion.
All right, so I move that we change the definition of dwelling unit as proposed in our packet. Change the use chart to add short-term rentals to everything except for general commercial, highway commercial, and industrial. Change the use definition, we'll actually add use definition of short-term rental. Let me get this straight. Utilize the short-term rental registration application form. Utilize the affidavit of compliance form, as well as develop the FAQ for short-term rentals for the lay public. And we'll discuss the fee and the regulations at our next meeting. Can you second it? Jeff seconds it, right? Any other further discussion on that?
Just that, are you okay if staff comes up with a pared down proposal? We can have this version and the pared down proposal to compare.
I'm fine with that, and I'm happy to work with you and Wendy like we did before, so. Okay, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign? All right, it passes. Thank you, guys. All right, moving on to new business, consideration to modify existing mining ordinance or implement a short mining ordinance or small mining ordinance. I'll just turn it over to you, Brian, if you want to kind of give a little update on this and we can kind of go from there.
So this is kind of a repeat item for planning commission back in 2019. The idea of, well, back up. So background, the city does have a mining ordinance that's in the city code. It was enacted back in 2013 or something like that. It's intended to apply for large mining operations. I think back when the old frac sand issue was a big thing in Minnesota, and there were a lot of companies opening up frac sand mining operations all over southeast Minnesota and Wisconsin. City wanted to consider enacting an ordinance to kind of regulate those things. So you do have a mining ordinance that covers what's intended to be a large mine that would have continuous operations for a long period of time. Back in 2019, there were a couple of different proposals that came forward that prompted questions about the applicability of that mining ordinance for smaller excavation and extraction operations that would be over a small area for a limited period of time. And one of those sites was proposed as a part of the whole Corps of Engineers dredge material management plan discussions that the city was having and trying to find areas that could be utilized for placement of the dredged material as a final resting place. And expansion of the Wabasha gravel pit area, which is familiar, is along Fifth Grant Boulevard, the large sand pit area. At the very west end of that, where they rerouted the county road to the frontage road, there's a small little bean field area that's owned by the Corner Company. And the Corners came to the city and proposed mining that area for sand and gravel for the primary purpose of opening up that area to place dredge material. kind of extending that dredge material placement area that already exists. So because the city has a mining ordinance, city staff said, well, you need to want to do this, you need to follow the mining ordinance. So we worked with the owners at that time to look at what they would need to do to mine that area under the current ordinance. And because the ordinance is set up for large mines over a long period of time, the response we got from the applicant was that the conditions were onerous and expensive, and it made, at least in their mind, the process to go through the permit for that, not something they wanted to pursue at the time. So at the time, we were asked, former city planner Christy Trisco was asked to develop an alternate ordinance that would apply to small and limited mines that would fit that type of operation. And just for reference, if they were to do sand and gravel mining on that Beanfield area, it would probably occur over a period of less than 2 to 3 years, something like that. It's small. So Christie put together a small working group, which included Big Tim, he was on that group, and Greg Paulson was on that group, a subset of planning commission at the time, and they developed a draft small and limited mining ordinance for consideration. That draft was prepared, went to the applicant, they looked at it, and for various reasons, they ended up kind of dropping that proposal at the time, but there was some evaluation of that limited ordinance done at the time, but it didn't move forward. Not exactly certain why, but it just kind of died. There was another area that was considered might be applicable to this ordinance, or might fall under the same type of situation, and that was it's referred to as the street pit area, and so it's kind of on the across the street from the American, along the slough there. You're familiar with that area? An area that was mined years and years ago, but it's been dormant for a long period of time. And there's been discussions about cleaning that area up and prepping it for some other use. There's a development proposal at one time there that never really went anywhere. There were some discussions about whether it should be a park area, whatever. But again, the question came, well, can we excavate that area, extract the sand and gravel resources, and reclaim that area to some other use? And again, the answer was, well, there's a mining ordinance that you need to go through. So with all that background, the question that is happening now is of course, we're moving forward with the dredge material management plan, the 217D agreement, or the city will be taking on some of that responsibility for moving that material and managing that material. The question of the Beanfield has come up. And so the applicant is back, and they've actually gone through and submitted an application under the larger ordinance. And again, we're running into some questions and roadblocks related to the some of the items they would need to do under that ordinance. And they're asking whether the city would consider, again, adopting a small and limited mining ordinance that would relax some of those requirements and make it a little more feasible to mine a small area for a limited period of time. What's not in the summary here too, but we've also run into as an issue is, I think it's really clear if you were to propose an excavation to extract sand and gravel to a depth of 100 feet in an operation that was going to occur over, the next 20 years, that's clearly mining, right? But the city also has an ordinance that applies to excavation and grading. And it's not clear in the code how to delineate between what is excavation and grading and what is considered mining. Clearly, we could agree on the far ends of the spectrum what would fall under those codes, but somewhere they meet in the middle, and it's not really clear where that is. And so that'd be another piece of this, that if planning commission and council are interested in exploring this, that we probably want to clarify, simply from the standpoint of giving staff some clarity on when somebody comes with a proposal, what ordinance do we regulate it on? So question is, are you interested in staff exploring this? If you were to bring back either modifications to the existing mining ordinance that would include provisions to accommodate small and limited mining likely on an area basis and a length of time basis, or enact some version of the small mine ordinance, bringing it back to you for consideration.
Yeah, I remember this distinctly. It was painful, but I think our discussion at the planning commission, if I remember correctly, it wasn't that we didn't want to do the small mining ordinance. And again, per Brian, it was dropped for some reason or another. But anyways, we never really proceeded to really prove it. I think one of the big concerns at the time, and I truly have no problems with it, either modifying or doing the small mining one, is I think we need to specify the area, how big we're talking about, the length of time, I think it's the number of, so 4 things. The area it's done, the length of time, where it's done, and having multiple open pits at one given time. I think the fear at that time was like, well, they could just have 6 open pits at any given time and it would look disastrous. Now, they say no, but I'm just telling you, there's nothing to prevent them not to do that. So I think that was a big concern at the time. If they do one pit, do that, and then reclamate it and then move on, that's the type of thing I'm fine with. Because the mining ordinance is a massive document. I mean, it's meant to really prevent a massive mine, is what it's prevent. So that's my opinion. I'll open it up to whoever. Any questions for Brian or comments or anything like that?
And I would just say before other questions that those are absolutely things we could control in an ordinance. We can absolutely set a limited area, we can set a limited time. In fact, the draft did have those 2 things in it. Concern about multiple holes, that we could absolutely address that. There are all kinds of permits that close that loophole related to connected actions. There's definitions we can put in the code to control that, to avoid people finding loopholes in that way. So
Yeah, it looks like it was less than 10 acres
yep.
and only 1 mine per contiguous property.
Yep.
And it must be reclaimed within 3 years.
Yeah, and some of that I would like to discuss length and time, but that's a whole other time. We can discuss that at any time. Any other comments, questions?
Is this any roadblock for the barge terminal project?
No, it's sort of connected because it's adjacent to the Corps of Engineers property. They're interested in, that area because of the pipeline that they might need to install to pump sand to the property that they own. And then just related, creating any space that we possibly can for dredge sand. And that's actually the intent, is to reclaim mined areas with dredge sand as the reclamation process. So creating space is just the only reason it's connected, but it wouldn't be necessarily be a roadblock to that happening. It just would create some additional space for dredge sand to find a home.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Yeah, go ahead, Chuck.
Brian did an excellent job of explaining what's going on here. And, I wasn't here in 2015, but I do own a small piece of Williston Basin land that has frackable shale in it. So I was watching it at the time. And Tim, you're right. It was almost panic at those days. Southeast Minnesota, Western Wisconsin were the places where the good frac sand was and still is, quite frankly. But things have changed over time. Texas is now the Permian is now the frac area, and that's where their frac sand is going. Anyway, what we did was this: taking a look at this little beanfield site, which is 4 acres, by the way. We drafted a draft application, as Brian mentioned. And I took a shot at that. Do have some experience with ordinances over my years. but I've never seen one quite like that. Um, Allow me to suggest that that was pieced together from a couple of different ordinances probably, because the numbering doesn't even go in sequence. We submitted that to Harry, and Harry in turn ran that around to the experts at Bolton Mink, of which they have many, to look at the various aspects. Harry came back to me, I don't know, about a month later with a lengthy commentary on the draft application. And I took a look at that, and I took a look at what we tried, and we came to the conclusion we're not going to be able to make this work for a mine size this small. Basically, the ordinance that you have now is structured to address silica mining, silica sand mining, frac sand mining. And Tim, you made the point, it was really designed, I think, to prevent it. You can't prohibit things, but you can ordinance them out of existence by having a strong enough ordinance. And I think that's what it was. Unfortunately, that's what we're trying to do here, I don't think. And I've talked with the Coners at length, and they've rethought their position on that small mining ordinance quite a bit since they saw me try to make an application under the existing ordinance for this little piece of ground. And I would suggest, commissioners, that you seriously look at doing that small mining ordinance, because as Brian mentioned, there's one other site at some point that it'd be applicable to, and that's the Strout site, under the same set of circumstances. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I'll open it up to Commissioner. Any questions, comments? I personally would welcome looking at a small mining ordinance. I would rather do that than probably modify the existing one, because then I think it's going to get way too confusing. But
Maybe not. Let us look at it.
I'll direct you guys to whatever you guys propose or whatever. I know what I'm looking for in it, so if it needs some of that, I think that's perfect. But I guess I'll leave it up to the experts of what they're going to propose and go that route.
Chuck mentioned that we didn't hear the lengthy review. We actually sat down, it's a long ordinance and there's a lot of.
It is a long ordinance.
We did sit down with Chuck's team and kind of went through point by point, and one of the real stumbling blocks we ran across came in the air quality monitoring piece, which I think, like you said, was drafted specifically to deal with frac sand mining. Well, that's one of the things I think you want to look at with sand and gravel mining. Not that we're not concerned about air quality.
Different.
But it's addressing it in an ordinance fashion from the standpoint of dust control rather than monitoring. So you can control dust by having regulations in there to physically control dust and not have the monitoring requirement. If that really doesn't control dust, it just tells you whether you're effective at the measures you're controlling, specifically related to if you were doing frac sand mining, that may be a concern, although that's if you look around the areas where they're doing frac sand mining and doing monitoring, whether that's really a concern or not, it's questionable.
Effectively. Yeah.
But that was the stumbling block we ran into, that we don't even have the expertise on staff to evaluate a plan that would be submitted or to give any guidance on. You'd have to hire a specific outside expert to analyze a plan that would be proposed under your current ordinance. So
So I mean, I don't know if you want a motion or not, but my personal opinion would be direct staff to review it and come up with the best proposal.
that's all we wanted. We just didn't want to do the work. And then say, what are you doing?
No, and I think the small one works because there's a number of areas I think we could potentially use it for. I just don't, I expressed, I don't want mines all over the place, nor do I want them forever either. So it's like, so we'll go from there. But I think you got the gist of what we want, so. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. So I can see some value in having two separate ordinances. I do feel like that the current ordinance, although it is very lengthy and very hard to administer, I think that there are a lot of really good things in there that maybe we could just clarify as a part of what we're proposing. And then having a smaller ordinance that still hits all of the major things that the larger ordinance is trying to hit on, proximity to wells, or making sure that all of the slopes are in a way that's not going to cause any sort of erosion, all these different smaller parts of it that kind of make up that whole. I think a smaller ordinance would do well.
We don't want it complicated, but if we're going through ordinance revision, there's probably some cleanup, not major revisions. Unless you want to put some cleanup.
Well, that's changed in 9 years.
Cleanup to be done with this large line.
Yeah, and it was pushed through, so, I mean, it's, yeah,
Yeah, there was a time element to that.
absolutely. So, okay, perfect. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Chuck. All right, I think that's it. We don't have board adjustment business, other business. Next meeting will be July 12th. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Scott will first, Sarah second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.